Welcome to EDO Breakthrough, the podcast where we tackle economic development challenges head on. From small towns to bustling cities, every place has its own hurdles to overcome. The EDO Breakthrough podcast creates an environment of collaboration, innovation, and understanding where we can share our real-life challenges and brainstorm solutions. I'm your host, Sandy Dubé, a certified economic developer and founder of PPR Strategies. Each week, we'll be welcoming a different, brilliant, place-based mind to talk through real-life economic development challenges that have been shared with us by you, our gracious listeners. Today, I'm joined by Sandy Castor. Yes, we have two Sandys on the line today. That won't be confusing at all, but it'll be fun for us. Sandy, can you introduce yourself, tell our listeners a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. My name is Sandy Castor. I have the privilege of being a department head of economic development. And I'm really excited to be here and talk about my experience in economic development, but just generally my career progression overall. As I've been, working, I should say, for over 20 years. Hard to believe.
Thank you. As you know, our listeners submit questions for our guests. And sometimes, I'll take a stab at them as well, some of the questions as well. But would love to hear about you and your career and kind of how you initially got started in economic development.
Yeah, so I would like to say that I got started in economic development kind of by accident. It wasn't intentional that I fell into this space, and I don't know if I would have described it or understood it in the way that I now understand it to be. So I started off someone who loved working on campaigns and really just enjoyed the governmental process. And through that, I've gotten opportunities to work for candidates as they were seeking to get elected to then work within their administrations. And I think that's where I really got to see what is possible and what government can do to better everyone's life and livelihood. So I had the opportunity and the fortune to work for Mayor Adrian Fenty in Washington, D.C., and I served as his director of scheduling and special assistant to the chief of staff, really getting to see the inner workings of an executive leader who was really championing and changing things in a way that D.C. hadn't yet seen, right? He was a disruptor in the best way possible for government. And then what that has led me to see and do and experience was there was a project, the DC streetcar project, that was needing to be advanced. I was transitioned over to the Department of Transportation. And I was like, what am I doing here? I'm not an engineer. I'm not a planner. This doesn't make sense for me. But I was able to apply my skills of being able to just get things done and demonstrate progress and collaborate across teams. And what that allowed me to do and see is the importance of transportation, but more importantly, transit-oriented development, and how it can truly impact and shift the way folks not only access their homes, but access work, access education. And had it not been for working in that administration, I don't know if I would have been as deeply involved or interested in economic development. But more importantly, being in a city like DC, at a time when President Obama was also president, it was just truly a kismet experience for me. And I think that just really transformed my desire, my relationship with economic development, but more importantly, how I wanted to serve. I think I've always wanted to be a public servant. My mother used to say to me when I was young, and I'm now looking back at my journals, she was absolutely correct. I would sign all of my journals, President Sandy S. Castor, right? Because I thought someday I would be the first African-American president of the United States of America. But I think what that was really telling me is I was always destined to serve, and I always wanted to do something that was greater than myself. And I get to do that every day, leading and being a part of transformative economic development strategies and projects like the ones that I have the pleasure of being a part of and in some respects leading today.
Wow. Okay. I don't often take notes and have so many additional questions during an intro, but wow, my mind was going into so many different directions. That was awesome. We are going to revisit the public office aspirations question that I've written down. So I am curious, but I'd love to talk a little bit more about transportation and economic development. I'm actually speaking later this month. I guess it might even be the week that this podcast airs, about economic development and transportation and kind of how they are interconnected. And I would love to dive a little bit deeper in that topic. Years ago, when I first started in economic development was a thing, workforce development was a thing. Like, we had all of these different, planning was a thing. Like, everything was in its somewhat siloed. And now, truly, more than anything else, it's all so interconnected and has to be. So I'm curious of that idea of transportation and economic development actually working together to solve the problem of, aligning workforce and housing and jobs. Can you elaborate on kind of your experience in that area?
Yes. So using DC as an example, I guess using all of my experience because it's cumulative over the years, one cannot exist without the other. Successful development projects would not be considered successful if they're not near some level of transportation, right? Especially nowadays in some of our cities. Our cities are seeing that they're struggling to come back, not because not because development isn't coming there. It's that development is slow or it's stalled, and it's slow or it's stalled because you can't get people there, or the movement of people is not happening with the level of intensity that's required for the economics to work. Right. So you cannot have economic development and not have transportation a part of the equation. I think folks have a narrow opinion of what transportation looks like. Right. Transportation needs to look like fixed rail. Transportation needs to look like streetcars. Transportation needs to look like buses. Transportation looks like more than those modalities. Transportation looks like microtransit. Transportation looks like car sharing in a way that folks, I don't think, have really tapped into to the full extent. I think transportation looks like, I think for one of the projects that I'm currently working on, you want to move people into an area, but you want them to park outside of the area and then be transported in, so that way we're not causing further congestion, right? That's what transportation looks like. Transportation looks like being innovative. Transportation looks like leveraging the technology that's before us. I know it's a touchy topic, but artificial intelligence, it exists already. It exists in our vehicles. It's been existing in our vehicles. If you've had that lane shift and your steering wheel shakes, I know that technology exists because my mom's 2013 has it, right? That is the type of technology that's going to continue to move us forward in terms of how do we move people, but move people in a safe way, right? So that encourages maybe more pedestrian movement. Maybe that encourages more cyclist movement. So you cannot have a thriving economy if people cannot get access to a place, to a thing, to a place of employment, to an educational location, to a training location, if the roads are not constructed in a way or configured in a way that allows for various modalities to live in concert with one another. Again, I don't think I had that sensitivity or that appreciation absent my experience in Washington, D.C., and seeing how they have been pretty masterful, in my opinion, with how they've laid out the bike lanes, and how they have leveraged the DC circulator and the DC bike share system. Capital Bike Share was what it was called before. I'm not sure what it's called now, but all of those modalities living in concert with one another, right? And being able to be a part of the next iteration in my current work, whether it's, improvements to New Jersey Transit, additional stops for the Amtrak, improvements to our train locations, all of that is really central to the future positive development of an area, but more importantly, the future advancement of people, right? I want to make sure that people have access to job opportunities, and they only have, and I think transportation is, when done right, creates that equity that often is absent when other areas are thriving. So we can all thrive if we all have access. And that's why transportation is so important in any economic development activity that's taking place.
Wow. Yeah, there's so much to unpack right there. Yes, we were working on a project for a public school system, a youth apprenticeship program, and as you can imagine, biggest challenge is transportation, and it's not just because they, often don't have, a driver's license or access to a vehicle. They are going to school in the city, but the employment is outside of the city. And so how are we connecting these things? And with everything that we talk about in economic development, we always try to remind our clients or who we're talking with, it's not about me, it's about the end user. It's, getting out of our own, way, to think about the problem through somebody else's lens. And it's so critically important. And I think that some urban cities are doing it very well. And then in a more rural community, it's kind of challenge after challenge. It's similar to broadband. It's one thing to like have this access in a tightly knit, centralized community. But then as soon as you add greater distance and then that's where you get more challenges and it gets more expensive to have access to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like it's always that last mile, that last little piece that needs to be solved for. And it's usually the most critical, the most costly. Sometimes there's resistance. All of those things factor into us being able to provide the services that folks need.
Yeah, I was in Birmingham, Alabama, in May. Are you from? You're not.
I'm not from Birmingham, Alabama, but Mayor Woodson is a part of an organization that I'm also have the pleasure to be a part of. And I am in awe of the work that he continues to do and the work that he champions. So, yes, love Birmingham.
Oh, yeah. And some of that micro transit piece and that last mile is awesome. Super affordable and scalable within different communities. So was really enjoying what they
take a look. And my current place of employment, they actually have a ride program that offers that microtransit ability as well, which we've launched, and I look forward to what the future holds based upon the ridership. But again, every place can benefit from looking at best practices, regardless of your current makeup, right? Some would think that what the North is doing can't be what the South could do. Absolutely. Best practices are best practices, regardless of the geographic location. People still need to move. Goods still need to move. And I want people to firmly understand goods come in the form of people. And when I mean people, your workforce. Your workforce is important. Moving your workforce is important. Growing your workforce is important. So again, transportation is important to all of that.
Yeah, well, and I think you're right. The north-south, things like that, sure, but urban-rural, what you do in a rural community isn't going to be exactly what they have done and implemented in a more urban area, or more densely populated area. But take that model, think about it, test it, create a pilot program, do something at a different scale in your rural community. It is not going to look exactly the same. You don't want it to, but it could still solve a problem.
Right.
So. Anyway, fun. Oh my gosh. I had no idea today we were going to go down a little transportation conversation direction. Super fun. I'd love to kind of, a lot of the questions that we get through the podcast are centered around, kind of starting in a new role and onboarding and learning economic development and figuring out these things. I'd love to hear a little bit about how, obviously you talked about your DC example, but any of the kind of structured or maybe even more intentional professional development path that you have taken since you've been in this role as, in economic development?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's been solely about being open, right? So I've been very open to the opportunities that people recommend for me to try out, conferences that they recommend me going to. And I feel like that has one conference has led to another, or one conference has led to an organization and inspired me to do different things. For example, Jessica Paolini, one of my former colleagues, she had introduced me to IEDC. So you've got to imagine, I've already built a portfolio of work from Washington, D.C. to the governor of New York to everything in between and thereafter. And IEDC was never anything that was top of mind for me to explore. Yeah, I've gone to AASHTO and done things of that nature. I've participated in almost every transportation organization that I could find or be introduced to. But when it came to economic development, it felt as if I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. And I was really leaning on mentors or advisors in that space, really leaning on developers and picking their brain as how they went about choosing projects and how they went about navigating governmental systems, and, very anecdotal in my approach. Then I got introduced to IEDC and I was like, oh my goodness, there are tons of professionals across this great country of ours that are willing to help me and give me best practices and introduce me to different policy platforms and different avenues of which I could potentially approach the work. And you're going to train me? This is awesome. Oh, and I can also become a certified economic development person. I said, okay, so now this has opened up has opened up the door for me in terms of what's possible for me professionally. So that is one organization that I give credit to Jessica Paolini, who now serves on their board, for introducing me to, and I have taken advantage of many of the trainings that they offer and introduced it to my colleagues at my place of work. And it's across the board. It's not just my office that I had offered it to when I first started, but now the entire department has access to the works that IEDC provides. In addition to that, I've also gone to several conferences like Site Selectors, and there's also a National Association for Black professionals and serving in a public administrative role. And attending those conferences has also helped to ground me in my work and identify individuals that can continue to either mentor, sponsor, or advise me in terms of how the forward progress of being someone in the economic development space and the various opportunities outside of just government, right? Because the predominant nature of my work has been in government, but there's so much more to be said about economic development and its impacts in either nonprofit or the private space. But I will say what has really grounded me in the work has been finding organizations that are continuing to allow me to be curious.
I love that. And yes, it is interesting that economic development is oftentimes that link or kind of the translator between the public sector and the private sector, and can serve as, a connector, as that bridge. It is truly a special place. And I do love that. I fully support pursuing certification.
So, fully stand to.
Good. It was something I didn't do for the bulk of my career. I started in economic development. I went down the path to get certified. I went through and did all the stuff, the 3-year program at OU EDI, Oklahoma University EDI program. But I finished that classwork back in the late 90s. So it's been a minute. And I did not get certified until last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you've been retaining and applying the information. Yep. So I'm sure preparation probably still felt daunting, but you've been doing the work. And that's what I find. Every time I take one of these trainings, I'm like, I'm doing this.
Yep.
I'm already doing this work. And now I just have the enhanced terminology around what it is that I'm seeking to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, and I had a boss at the time. I changed jobs, and my new boss, after I'd gone through all the stuff, said, "I'm not certified. You don't need to get certified." And I was like, okay. And it became my biggest career regret. So I applaud you for leading from example and encouraging your entire team, and wherever it is, anyone that's listening, encourage. It's not just about you. It has to be about the entire team, and up-leveling their skills to do that. So I have, fully support members of my team to get certified or pursue, coursework, professional development, all the things. But yeah, it took other colleagues saying, "Sandy, it's not too late. Like, you can do this. I know it was a minute ago when you took these classes, but you can do this." So it was fun.
I'm glad they pushed you to do it.
It was good. Yeah, thank you. Prior to this conversation, we had a little prep call, which I do love, being able to sit down and talk and meet and stuff. And we had talked about kind of the power of mentors, and a little bit of what we've been talking about is kind of in that same vein, professional development and mentorship. And obviously having somebody introduce you to IEDC is really important. Talk to me a little bit about, your career and, mentorship or reverse mentorship. Like, how are you mentoring others? How are others mentoring you? Can you talk about that?
So mentorship is such an interesting, an interesting place. Oftentimes people like to put everyone in the bucket of mentorship, that is either offering them advice or sponsoring them for a job. Not everybody's your mentor, first and foremost. And your mentor doesn't necessarily need to be in your place of work, right? Your mentor has to be someone that you trust implicitly, right? They have to be someone that you can tell the good to, the bad to, the ugly to. It needs to be the person that you can be completely honest with. So that way they can help give you, that personalized, that tailored advice as to how you can move your career forward. And sometimes it's not just about your career, it's how you relate to others, right? So I think my mentors have been really great in giving me information and insight as how I best can relate to others, because communication is something that is going to make you effective in anything that you do, whether it's work or personal. So I think that is key in terms of when you're trying to identify a mentor, it should and must be someone who you can be completely honest and vulnerable with. Otherwise, it does not work. But that's not to say that that individual isn't for you. You just have them mislabeled, right? And oftentimes we mislabel people and the roles that they play in our lives. Everybody's, my mom would always say, everybody's not your friend. And I'd be like, no, but mom, they are. And then I found myself telling that to my daughter, and then I had to remind myself, no, everybody's not your friend. And that's okay, because there are different roles that everyone plays, very similar to the workplace. Not everybody's your mentor, but there are people who could be advisors. And those people you go to and you ask really direct, discreet questions to. And the sole role that they play is providing you insight and advice in terms of how you can navigate a particular situation, a particular question that you have. That's the role that advisors play. It's not to say that they can't become a mentor over time, but today they are your advisor. And then you have sometimes the fortunate place of finding sponsorship. And sponsorship is really what's been critical to me in terms of climbing the ladder. People who are advocating and speaking my names in rooms that I'm not presently in, where my experience is shining through, their interaction with me is shining through. And that, I will tell you, I do not recall the last time I actually applied for a position. And the reason is because my work and my work ethic has spoken for itself, that my name has come up in rooms that I was not necessarily in. Jobs have been referred to me, or I've been referred to jobs before I even knew that the jobs were available, right? And that speaks to the sponsors that I have had in my life that have allowed my career to advance in ways that I could have never imagined. So yes, mentorship is important. And I'm taking all of this from Carla Harris, who said this, who has been saying this for over 20 years, the importance of having a mentor, a sponsor, and advisor. Also, my career journey, people have been talking about board of directors. Now, am I there yet for board of directors? I don't know. My close girlfriends would say, you have them. You have a board of directors. They exist. They're like, so they count themselves as my support system. And then, so those are my fans, I guess, because they have three categories apparently in board of directors: fans, critics, and sponsors. And so like your fan club are usually like your friends, the people who will be there for you through the tough times. I hate to say a critic, but you need that. You need someone who's just like, I don't necessarily know if I believe in you, but I see something in you and I'm willing to point out the things that could be fixed, or the things that I see as problems that no one else is going to tell you. But since I'm not your friend, I can tell you these things because it doesn't hurt me one way or the other, the way that you're going to take this information. So, that's a board of directors. I'm not quite there yet in my career. I think that's more ad hoc, but I definitely live by the mentor, sponsor, advisor. You need those three, but you especially need a sponsor as you're trying to move through your career. And that starts with your network. Your network is going to increase your net worth every step of the way. And that starts young. That starts in terms of how you navigate friendships and how you navigate conflict. And it gets applied personally and professionally throughout your life.
I have never heard that. I am now going to go down this Carla Harris, train. I think that you explained that so beautifully. This idea of, advisors, mentors, and sponsors. And I'm playing with people, as I'm sure listeners are too, people in their head and what bucket they fit into. I think that we all need people in our lives, maybe that are not friends, but will give us some tough honesty, and because that's what makes us better. But we have to be at a place to receive it. And yeah, I am going to be sitting on that one for days, weeks, months, years to come, Sandy. I absolutely am like mind blown in such a beautiful way, that I I want to encourage all of our listeners to think of that and who they have in their sphere and how they can apply, or who they could cultivate, those relationships that they can cultivate, and how they can do that for others. It's one thing to be able to receive that feedback and receive it in a kind or even not so kind way that it was presented, but certainly being able to give feedback in a way that is coming from a place of respect and honesty and intended growth for the other person. Yeah.
And I would love to say that this is something that I've been able to take in over time, and I take it in stride, and I'm really great. I'm not.
Yeah.
I haven't.
You haven't perfected it?
I have not perfected it. I'm a continuous work in progress. I will say my most recent experience, my current work experience, I have been blessed to have someone that I get to call my boss, who has served as an advisor at first, and I feel is more of a mentor now. And we've had those tough conversations in terms of how I communicate and relate to others. That has allowed me to grow exponentially in ways that I didn't even know was possible for me when I first entered the role. So I've been really grateful for those experiences, because what that's led me to do, and hopefully continue to become over time, is a leader. I don't want to manage. Management is not fun. Anyone who tells you, oh my God, I love managing. No, management is not fun. Management is a task. It is a responsibility. But leading people is where the true vision lies. Leading people is where the true purpose is. And when you lead people, typically you are inspiring them to see and become the best version of themselves in alignment with the work that they do. That's the place that I want to be in, because that's the place that my current boss has allowed me to operate from, because he is that to us, right? So like, those are the things that when I talk about having a mentor and a sponsor and an advisor, if they are not allowing you to elevate your game on a consistent basis, you might want to reshuffle the deck.
Yeah, you're right. And again, kind of thinking about the people in my sphere and in my network that fall into those different categories, and how I can be that to others, and where that role lies. I love learning. I have a pretty young team, which is fun and challenging. And so preparing them for success, even if they don't know that that's what I'm trying to do right now, hopefully in 10 years from now, they're like, oh, now I get it. Now I know what Sandy was doing. All starts to make sense. So I had a conversation a couple of days ago. We were working on an event, and I have a colleague that I was kind of trying to transition into a new role. And so I was coaching her throughout the day at this event. And I kept leaning over saying, okay, tip for the day, da, 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 and tip for the day. And it was everything from like the way, handling, it was a tech type position. And so the way she was handling, the slides and the behind the scenes, to the speaker that was coming on board, to at one point I said, and when you do these things, and I pulled out a toothbrush and toothpaste out of my bag, I said, bad breath is not your friend. So you just need to be able to like carry some mouthwash or whatever. And she just laughed. Like it was one of those, like, she had no idea what I was pulling out of my bag of tricks. And that was it. I said, just take notes. That's all. I'm just trying to share with you stuff that I've had to learn the hard way over the years.
Yeah.
So it was just,
and having a young team, I'm pretty sure, like, very much for the teams that I have the privilege of being a part of, I'm learning from them as well, right? So I know we had talked about like that reverse mentorship. It's not one directional. I am constantly learning from my team as well, because they're also providing me feedback. The way you communicated with me on this, or my preferred communication style is this, or, and sometimes it's not a critique or criticism. It's, I just want to commend you on the way that you led that meeting, or I want to commend you how you led us through this challenging time. That too helps me to hone in on, okay, this was actually really well done. How can I continue to leverage that approach and other things that I'm tackling? So that reverse mentorship is also very, very important. One thing to manage up, but it's another thing to manage across, and another thing to manage down, all levels of leadership are required in order for anybody, any individual, but more importantly, any team to be successful.
Yeah, well, and that's awesome. And creating an environment where feedback can come in from all directions. And of course, it's much easier to give really positive feedback, but it's another thing to say. And I am very fortunate to have people on my team that will say, Sandy, you might want to watch, like yesterday or an hour ago, you did this thing, and you might just want to watch how you do that in the future, or whatever the example. Actually, that was an example from earlier in the week. It was my facial expressions. I got to watch my facial expressions
The
on.
facial expressions weren't delivered. Your words were saying one thing, your face was saying another. I'm guilty, right?
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
again all learning about how the whole body is communicating
Uh-huh.
constantly.
Yeah, yes. So it was good. So one of the questions that we often get is about soft skills, and obviously facial expressions, word choice, communication, leadership, some of these elements. I'm curious, in your experience, what are you finding as some of the most critical soft skills in economic development, and any advice on how we can be improving those skills?
Yeah, so I would first like to get away from calling them soft skills, right? They're not soft. They're critical. I think when people think soft, they think like, oh, that's secondary. These are not primary skills that you need to have. No, they're actually primary skills that you need to have. How you communicate, how you in writing and verbally, that's not a soft skill. That's a necessary skill. How you pick up the phone, how you respond to emails, that is not a soft skill. That is a primary skill. How you're able to emotionally regulate yourself, that is not a soft skill. That is a primary skill, right? So I think, and this is something that we've been discussing quite a bit in workforce development. We have to get away from utilizing the terminology of soft skills because what we're noticing is those are the things that our candidates that we're putting forward at all age levels, all generations, they're missing because they're so good at the tactical work. They're so good at, having the knowledge and the technical skills that are required for the role, but they are missing the skills that allow for that interpersonal connection. I often say deals are not made because 1+1 = 2. Deals are typically made because the individuals in the room found alignment on other things that had everything to do with what their day job is. They were able to personally collect in a different way that allowed them to hear the individual and what they were pitching as a project and receive it, and the reception was different. So if your soft skills are playing the way that they should be playing, you'll even be able to see deals and conversations come to a close quicker, or that collaboration happen sooner because you've been able to connect with someone on a deeper level. That's what soft skills allow you to do. So I can write a great email, but if I still come off and present in a way that is not that people cannot receive, doesn't matter. I could be the most intelligent person in the room. If I lack the charisma, the care, the emotional intelligence, it's not going to make a difference.
Oh, I love the fact that you turned the question around to the language that you wanted to use. I respect that. I really appreciate it. Thank you for doing that. And you're so right. I will often say, like, there are things that, yeah, I can't teach you to smile. I can't teach you to talk with a smile on your face. I can't, yeah, there are just some things that I do not have the capacity to do. I know my limitations. I often try times. I love hiring people that have worked in hospitality.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is a skill set that you are personable.
Yep. In order for you to have been successful in that space, you need to be able to, you are personable. You can communicate and talk and like smile your way through very challenging circumstances. And you're a problem solver because you never know what sort of challenge is going to come at you at any given day or moment. So I love recruiting those that have experience in the hospitality industry.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Uh, I'm curious, with all of this, what would you do differently if you had to do it all over again? Would you?
I would probably say yes quicker to things. There are some opportunities that I would wait and overthink for too long. For example, I had an opportunity to go work in Florida, Miami to be exact. And I waited a week to respond to that email because I was like, I got to think about it. I've got to discuss it with my parents because I was in my early 20s at this point in time. And I was going to be utilizing a gap year. And you've got to imagine being the first generation to go to college and to call my parents and say, thank you for this good Carnegie Mellon University education, but I am going to step away from it for a year to go explore this opportunity. So I waited a week before I responded back to that email. I finally responded and they're like, yeah, the opportunity in Miami is no longer available, but we can ship you off to Portland, Oregon. I wish sometimes that I had the ability and the fearlessness to just say yes. Right. So when Shonda Rhimes came out with her book, The Year of Yes, and I wish that book was there for me sooner. Right. Because then I think I would have said yes to the things that I was scared to do, because I think it's so much better for you to do things scared than it is for you to do things prepared. I'm a firm believer in God. And I don't know if this is the right avenue or place to say it, but as a believer, as someone who moves in that way, whatever I feel I'm not prepared for, God and my talents and my God-given abilities will make room for that preparation to take place in whatever shape and form. So the only thing that I would ever do is I would say yes more. I would take advantage of more opportunities than less. I would believe in my ability to figure it out because I consistently do. And I think that now, would I change anything? No, my career has been great. And my career is not over. So I wouldn't change anything. I think everything that I've done to date has not only bettered myself, but bettered the people that I've had the ability to give other opportunities to. I can look back on almost every career opportunity that I've had and recall a young person or an individual that I have also reached back and given an opportunity to. And that is my life's work. So as long as I continue to do that, I'm okay. Failure is Written in Pencil was a book that I read back in the day. I can't remember the pastor who wrote it, but it's written in pencil. So I can erase and rewrite it. And that's what I've continued to do with my career. So I've made no mistakes. If anything, I've made some minor edits.
Bam. Felt like that was the mic drop right there. That was great. Okay, while I could sit here and talk with you all day long, I have found this so much fun and really enjoyed your stories and hearing about your career and answering some of our questions. This has been great. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I ask my final question?
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and being interested in my story. Again, this was not something that I think either you or I sought out. It was just a genuine connection that we had. It's been maybe a couple of years now since
it's been a couple of years.
Right.
Yeah.
But that goes to the point of you left a lasting impression on me and I left a lasting impression on you for me to even be here for us to share our stories together in this space. So I am grateful to you in this moment.
Thank you very much. So my last question for my guests is, what has been your EDO breakthrough?
Oh, I've had many, right? I've had many. One of my EDO breakthroughs took place in Washington, D.C., in which the highest compliment that I got, because at that point in time, I was considering law school, and was one of the attorneys. And she was just like, I really commend the way that you were able to put us all in the room. Now, I'm the youngin', because I think at that point in time, I was in my 20s. Put us all in a room, having heard all of our grievances about a particular matter, and craft a path forward and outline it in such a way that we all kind of walked away feeling like there was a compromise that was stricken, but we weren't compromised in the process. That was high praise in my 20s. And so I think that was a skill that I realized that I had, and I held on to that. Fast forward to working in the Cuomo administration and having the opportunity on working on some really groundbreaking, innovative projects that are still ongoing today. But when you walk through that Moynihan station, and I can be like, I had something to do with that. Or when you go through an easy pass and there's no offense to the toll collectors, I respect them highly, but you're not sitting in the traffic that you used to, because now it is Now you don't need to have an easy pass to go through. That was legislation that I had the opportunity to work on in partnership with some brilliant minds that still work in and around the state of New York today. Looking at the LaGuardia project, that was another project that got developed under my tenure with Governor Cuomo. So being able to work on projects and look and point to things that I can say I was a part of, that's my EDO breakthrough. But more importantly, it's when it's impacting communities of color, impacting communities that are underserved, underrepresented, or under-resourced. When I can point to those projects and say that I've had impact or I've been a part of that impact, that is always and will continue to be my EDO breakthrough. And it could be just as simple as I was able to get someone a voucher to get from point A to point B for that job interview, or they took that capital bike share program and they were able to utilize it despite being unbanked. Those are the things that I can look to and say, those are my EDO breakthroughs, providing that equity, providing that equal access to individuals on a daily basis to be an active participant in our economy.
Wow. I cannot thank you enough for sharing with me and our listeners. I really have enjoyed our conversation, and I will just continue to stay in touch and see awesome things.
Thank you.
The EDO Breakthrough podcast is brought to you by PPR Strategies. PPR Strategies, standing for People and Places Reimagined, is a strategic consulting firm working specifically with EDOs and other place-based organizations. We share the unique stories of communities through communication, strategic planning, marketing, media relations, and more. Visit us at pprstrategies.com and find our contact information in the show notes. I'd like to give a big thank you to you for listening. Remember, together we are unstoppable.